Welcome everyone to our panel, and I'd just like to summarize very briefly what our panel is looking at. I'm aware that we've got limited time and a large panel, and I'm sure you've all got very interesting questions to ask them. Our panel is effectively looking at the challenges that children nowadays face, notably in extreme situations and excluded communities. And what they're trying to look at alongside the challenges is also the types of solutions and vehicles that have been developed in order to empower children, which has been the theme over the past 2 days. Empower them in order to give them the ability to be resilient and also inspire hope, not only in them but in the surrounding communities. So we're going to start off with a presentation by Noah Gluskinos of Haifa University. Noah is a social worker, and she is also a therapist, a clinician that provides emotional therapy to children. She works with marginalized populations in the past and in the present in Africa and Israel. And she worked a while on an AIDS treatment program in rural Zimbabwe. So, Noah, if you'd like to come and join us, please.
Thank you for the presentation. So I'm Noah. I'm a social worker from Haifa University. Can you hear me? Should I speak closer? Okay. And I'm going to present the research Understanding Resilience of Asylum-Seeking Children in Israel as Reflecting Their Day-to-Day Social Emotional Functioning. This research was done by a group of researchers from the Faculty of Health and Welfare in the University of Haifa, as you can see here, including myself as a MA student. So the aim of the project was to promote community and personal resilience of the Eritrean community that is living in Haifa, and we examined the perceptions and experiences of the Eritrean asylum-seeking parents and children regarding their personal and community resilience, and we also operated an intervention program for the children based on the needs that were raised in the interviews. So the pictures that you see here are all from the intervention program. So generally about refugees in Israel, there are approximately 22,500 stateless asylum seekers that are living in Israel, and among them are approximately 10,000 children. The state of Israel does not systematically review their asylum request, and as a result, the majority of them remain stateless. And this lack of clear policy regarding their status leaves the Eritrean community without access to essential health and welfare services, and this is pushing them into poverty, increase their exposure to risk, and increase their mental health issues. In Haifa, which is the focus of the current study, there are approximately 500 refugees from Eritrea and around 150 children. So the framework for this research relies on two main concepts. The first one is the term permanent temporariness, which relates to the presentation of Serafina regarding the temporariness of the displaced person. So the concept of permanent temporariness refers to experience of living in a prolonged state of uncertainty regarding one's future, and this is often imposed on migrants and refugees by authority who use time as a tool of control. So in Israel, the temporariness of the Eritrean community stems from the fact that they have been living here as stateless people without rights. They are vulnerable to deportation at any time. However, they have been living in Israel over a decade, which create a sense of permanency. And this permanent temporariness creates feelings of alienation, foreignness, and lack of control over one's life. And the second framework that we are going to look at is the integrative risk and resilience model for understanding the adaptation of immigrant origin children and youth, which relies on two theoretical frameworks, Bronfeld-Brenner's biological model and Mustaine risk and resilience framework. It presents three positive areas of adaptation that children should acquire as they develop. The first two, the developmental and psychological tasks, are universal for all children. And the third one, the acculturative task, which relates to tasks regarding acculturating in the receiving country's culture, is unique only for the immigrant origin children. And it presents four forces that can affect those areas of positive adaptation, starting from the global context to the context of the country of reception, the microsystems such as the community, the neighborhood, the family, and the individual level context. So in summary, the literature shows that the parental legal status is a crucial factor in children's development that affect their social, emotional well-being, both immediately and in the long term. And in this case, it's also the children's legal status because they are also stateless, although they were born in Israel. Therefore, the research questions are, what is the life experience of asylum-seeking parents and children? What are the factors that promote or hinder their resilience? And how is the day-to-day social-emotional function of the children is affected by their legal status? The method of this research is qualitative. We did 23 semi-structured in-depth interviews with 13 parents and 10 children in the ages of between first grade to fifth grade. First grade to fifth grade, and they were not interviewed in dyads. The interview questions explore strength, opportunities, barriers, needs, as well as relationships of the parents and children. They were recruited using a combination of convenience and snowball sampling, and the data analysis was conducted using thematic analysis. So regarding the findings, from the interviews, there were two main themes. The first one was dynamics of fragmentation. So the fragmented life experience is the main resilience hindering factor. And we saw those fragmentations in 4 spheres. I will not go in depth into this theme. I will go more in depth into the second one, but it's important to understand this fragmented life experience in order to understand how they build their resilience according to that. So we see in the right sphere, the fragmentation is manifested by the lack of access of the families to rights and services since they are stateless. In the community sphere, we see an experience of fragmented community, which means that there is not a lot of connection between the families, there's not a lot of mutual help, and the community is not perceived as external support system for the family. In the family sphere, we see a fragmentation between the nuclear family that lives in Israel and the extended family that lives abroad, and they don't have a way to reunite since they are stateless and they don't have even a right to leave Israel and come back. And in the intrapersonal sphere, we see a fragmentation in the perception of identity, which there were many, but I will not go into depth here. But what is important to realize is that those fragmentation leave the family unit without essential support systems such as the state with its rights and services, the community, and the extended family. The second theme was the dynamics of convergence. So here we saw how the families in Haifa converge into the intrafamilial sphere and the intrapersonal sphere as their way to build resilience. And we saw that in 4 aspects. The first one was the parent as a promoting resilience factor for the child. So we had 2 perceptions of the parental role. The parents saw themselves in 2 aspects. The first one we called the total parent, which means that the parents saw the role in a very total manner, which means they had to do a lot of sacrifices for the sake of the children, and their life was put in a, I would not even say in a second place, but their life was really not important at all in comparison to the future of the children. And the parent is a mediator of displacement for the child. And here we saw 2 techniques. Either they used dialogue and did tell the children information about their statelessness, or they withdraw information and didn't tell the children about their status, but both were ways to promote resilience among their children. And the children perceive their parents' role as a protective factor in a different way. They saw the parents as providing security and protection, and mainly regarding the violent environment of the neighborhood which they live in. And the children talked a lot about feeling stressed about the violent environment of the neighborhood. And the second one was as a figure who provides emotional support and help them regulate emotion through dyadic regulation. We have a quote of Petrus, an asylum-seeking father, who speaks about the perception of the total parent. Now I don't think about my life, I think only about their life. I don't care about myself. I only want them to have a good life. It doesn't matter where I am, it only matters they will be comfortable. That is what I want, that is what calms me down. The second conversion is the child as a promoting resilience factor for the parent. So we see it's a reciprocal process. And here both the parents and children had the same perception about the role of the child as a protecting factor for the parent, either through instrumental help, while the parents give household responsibilities for the child, and the child helps to maintain the family unit without the missing support system, or through emotional support, where we see that the parent-child relationship serves as a source of emotional support for the parents because the child is perceived as a strong motivational factor. We have a quote of Shawit, an asylum-seeking mother, who says, "My oldest daughter is like a sister to me, a mother-in-law. She's everything to me, everything. She has a good heart." So we see how the child is replacing the fragmented family who is not living in Israel. And we have Delina, an asylum-seeking child, who says about herself, "Sometimes when my mom and dad don't have the energy, so I prepare food for them because it's hard for them. They want to help and I tell them no. Then I make food for them. I give it to them to eat, and when they fall asleep, I do everything myself." The third conversion is the partnership between the parents as a promoting resilient factor for both parents. And this factor was raised only by the parents, not mentioned by the children. And they mainly speak about division of parenting roles in a different way from which was in Eritrea. There are different gender roles here than in Eritrea, and the emotional support that they provide each other, and therefore they help each other maintain the family unit without the support of community, family, and state. We have Akbaret, an asylum-seeking mother, who says, "We're always talking about it. Who has it? Like if there's a parents' day, who can go? And we talk about who has it harder, me or you." She means her husband. So we discuss it, and then I go. When it's hard, like if they don't give me time off from work, then my husband goes. That's how kids were raised. We really help each other. If there's no family, we manage just me and my husband. And the fourth conversion is a conversion into the intrapersonal sphere, where children and parents both identify strength in themselves that help them build resilience. And the strength of the children were divided into two groups: strength in the context of relationship, which include mainly empathy and the ability to regulate negative emotions. So through these abilities, the children help themselves foster positive relationship and create support networks. And strength in the context of themselves, of the self, which include mainly achievement and independence, through which children advance themselves as individual. And we have a quote of Ermela, an asylum-seeking child, who talks about the strength of being independent. "Most of the time, if something is hard, it will pass, or I try. I don't know what will happen because I don't know. I don't know if it's something serious enough to ask for help. If it was something much more serious, I would definitely ask for help. But if I come across something, I feel I need to solve it myself." And the parents identify three main strengths: their faith in God, which gives a permanent support that continues regardless of the immigration, unlike other relationships that were disrupted due to the displacement. Optimism and hope. They use a lot of cognitive techniques that help them stay hopeful, like focusing on positive events, nurturing and encouraging inner voice, and life skills that help them assert their right. Either they operate outside of the system and assert their right independently through entrepreneurship or maneuvering, or they work within the system and assert their rights through the institutions using assertiveness or being patient. And here you can see some drawings of the children. The children's interview were done through a playful activity, not only conversation, and they drew the different aspects of their life. So we have here the intrapersonal sphere. She talks about her empathy to her peers, the familial sphere, the school sphere, which I didn't go into depth in this presentation, and the neighborhood. So for discussion, we have two themes, two themes, the fragmentation and the conversion. So we have two themes for the resilience of the asylum-seeking children and parents. The fragmentation, which describes the implication of the asylum policy in Israel that leaves them in a state of permanent temporariness, and the convergence within the family unit that emerges in response to the low community resilience and the exclusionary policies. So this conversion shows us that the parent-child relationship is the main source of resilience for both sides reciprocally, and that although the parents and children live in exclusion, it appears that the attachment system still functions as a protective factor and promotes resilience. And we call this a unique process family-centered resilience. It's a specific type of resilience that the families in Haifa showed, where they converge into the familial sphere and the intrapersonal sphere as their central strategy for building resilience. And it acts as a compensatory system for the missing community and policy support system. And it relies on two main factors: the personal trait of the family members and the family as a unit. And to conclude the discussion, we would like to explore how it affects their social, emotional, functioning through the integrative risk and resilience model if we take into account that the political and social context of reception is the asylum policy that leaves them in a state of permanent temporariness and creates a microsystem of low community resilience and high familial resilience. We can see some effects on their development. For example, in the developmental sphere, we can see that they did develop the ability of self-regulation, as the children and parents report. In the psychological sphere, we did see that a lot of them have symptoms of ADHD, which affects their functioning in school and their academic self-esteem, and mainly their language learning. And a lot of stress was manifested around the violent environment of the neighborhood. And in the acculturative task, we did see that they form some kind of social, ethnic, and national identity. They do speak about themselves being both Eritrean and Israeli. They have good peer relationship with both Eritrean and Israeli children, and they don't speak about experiencing racism, unlike the parents who speak a lot about experiencing racism in their fragmented life experience. We suggest family-centered intervention to support the emotional functioning of the children through strengthening the parents, and academic support to promote language learning while also strengthening areas of high self-esteem, and to do more research using a quantitative method and a larger sample, and also involve the school as an important sphere in the children's life. Thank you for listening, especially in the last 4 minutes.
So thank you very much, Noah, and everybody. That was a wonderful presentation, very insightful, and it was interesting to learn about children's strengths, parents' strengths, and the way that the parents and the children work together. We're now going to move on to our next presentation by two speakers. We've got Eyal Geffen and Daniel Geffen. Okay. Eyal Geffen and Daniel Chester, both from the Michlala of Jerusalem College. And Eyal Geffen is currently doing his doctorate at the Hebrew University. They are going to be talking about From Crisis to Resilience and the role of schools as anchors for children's rights and well-being during the current war. So over to you, please.
Shalom, good afternoon to everyone, and it's great to be here. And one of the advantages of being in the last session is that can seek what we haven't talked about so far, at least today, and try to contribute something new. As you know, it wasn't planned, but the siren 5 minutes ago is a good start for my lecture, because while most of our presentations, at least those which I heard today, deal with specific populations which are directly impacted by crisis or in this case by the war, and we discussed children in the north and in the south. The research which I wish to present now, together with my partner Daniel Chester, who collaborated with me throughout the research, though I'm presenting it due to language advantages. The research discusses the impact on children throughout the state of Israel in different contexts, including in places which are not at the front line of the conflict, as in Jerusalem or in other places where it was felt less directly, and still we explore the impact on children's rights and well-being in the context of education. So some context of our study. Daniel and I teach in Michlala College in Jerusalem, and we teach seminar paper for master's graduate students. And 8th of October, we had already planned on the Sunday after Simchat Torah to meet and plan the research project for the coming year. And we discussed we were going to build the project around Principles Authority. This is a school leadership program. And we say, come 8th of October, and I say to Daniel, the Principles Authority and how to build it in the school isn't exactly what's concerning all the students and everyone else in Israel at the moment. And we decided to change our topic and to ask the students to reflect and explore their challenges and the challenges in education, as school leaders, as educators during the time of war, in the aftermath of the 7th of October and the continuing conflict. So we conducted the research as a reflective ethnography in which participated 81 students, all of which, or most of which, were practicing educators, teachers, school leaders, principals, other educators in the school system in Israel, and we asked them to do two things. We actually did more, but due to the vast scope of the material we collected, I'm focusing here on 68 reflective journals. We asked the students simply over a period of months to write down their experiences as educators working with children in diverse contexts in Israel during the war, and to also conduct interviews with their peers, with other teachers and other educators in the system to explore their experiences. The advantage of this study is, first of all, it's the experiences of the teachers, of the educators, as they felt them themselves, as they experienced them, not just in interviews which are reflective after the fact, but we ask them to actually document their experiences as they experience them and to reflect on them, to reflect on how they cope working with the children, working with the schools, working with the parents during the war. And also, that, as I mentioned at the outset, our study encompassed broad regions. We have students who study at Michlala from the Golan in the north, the Galilee. We have several students from Tzfat, and also students from the south. We had students from the area surrounding Gaza. We have students as far as Eilat, and students from Jerusalem, from the center of the country. So we were able to collect through this research a broad perspective on the impacts of the war and how educators coped with them. Now, this is vast data, and I'm focusing now on 5 specific themes which emerged from the data when we conducted thematic analysis, which can all be grouped through the idea of the school as anchors in crisis. So I think Tamar, in the session in the morning, raised the concept of the community as an anchor in times of crisis. Here we focus on the role of the schools, of the educators, as anchors for children's rights and for their well-being in times of crisis. So, as much as the time allows, I want to present 5 central themes. And the first theme is that, if you'll excuse me, it's bloody difficult to be able to be an anchor for children in times of crisis when you're floating. And if you've ever sailed a ship, which I haven't, so you'll know that to use an anchor which is floating is pretty much impossible. And with the children, says Aharon, I was very closed off and didn't share. It was very difficult for me. I didn't know what to say because I had nothing to say. Or another teacher, as the days went by, I began to feel overwhelmed and incapable of teaching. I felt frustrated because the children's concerns about the war were entirely valid. And it's very difficult to support when you need support yourself. And nevertheless, despite this vast mental challenge of the teachers and educators, we find a multifaceted aspects where the teachers and the school did indeed make vast efforts in order to serve as anchors for the children. So the first anchor, our second theme, is the anchor of protection and emotional support. This goes well beyond the classic role of the teacher. The teacher is traditionally mainly there to teach, to impart knowledge, to help the student in the educational context, within the school parameters. But the war, the crisis, brings about a situation where the educators need to go over and beyond that in order to support the child, to protect him or her physically and particularly emotionally. We find here the concept of locus parentis, which is usually it's not so politically correct nowadays to give the teacher as much a role like the parent. However, in times of conflict, sometimes there's no choice. Says Moti, teacher, 6th grade in Jerusalem. Again, this is not in the center of the conflict. I felt a kind of parenthood towards these children whose parents couldn't calm them down. So we're not only talking about places where the parents aren't there physically because they're dead or because they've been captured or because they've been called up. Sometimes the parents are physically there, but as we heard in the lecture before me, sometimes the parent in times of crisis isn't capable of helping the student, the pupil, the child, because they're emotionally challenged themselves. There were parents who would call me, says the teacher, at night to soothe their crying child distressed by the sirens. Jerusalem, they hear sirens, the child is distressed, and the parents sometimes weren't able to calm them. Who was able to calm them? The teacher in school talked to the child over the phone and was able to calm them down. Another story relates Moshe. And here we're related to evacuees from southern Israel, close to the border with Gaza. So he relates, I gathered the children for an open discussion. How are you feeling? It allowed for emotional ventilation. And again, we heard today earlier on about the importance of enabling emotional ventilation at school, helping the children voice their feelings. But it was risky because you don't know what's going to come up in this discussion. And then children started sharing. My dad is a hero. My dad has been called up. My dad is this, my dad is that. And then Yehuda suddenly shouted, everyone's dad is alive, but only my dad's in the graveyard. His father was killed on the 7th of October. And we've got children, these are second grade children, so you can't control it, and not every child is aware or thinks about it. And what does he do? I looked into his eyes, relates the teacher, and I realized I was his anchor, like his father. His father isn't here, but as his teacher, I feel that I now need to be his anchor. I told him, your dad isn't just in the grave. He's here with us, and you're continuing his life's work. At that moment, something incredible happened. He stopped crying, smiled, and said, I'm continuing my dad's legacy. So here we see a teacher who, through providing an inspiring response at the right time, was able to change a challenging situation in the classroom to something which would anchor the child in a place of emotional support. Come on? 4 minutes. Okay. Thirdly, the managerial anchor. The school, and particularly the school management, serve as an anchor to ensure educational continuity at a time of crisis. This is challenging because, again, we said the floating anchor is the manager, is the school teachers who are struggling themselves, and the school leader, the principal, needs to balance empathizing with the difficulties of the teachers while prioritizing institutional needs and ensuring that the children continue their education and their support even in times of crisis. As one principal related, that it's challenging because we were prepared practically, having gone through COVID 5 years ago, so we know what to do in practice. But by definition, crisis is something you can't prepare for. If you can prepare for it, it's not a crisis. Emotionally, it was very difficult. But yet, as a different principle relates, we had to literally tailor solutions for each individual to ensure the school's stability. We need to balance empathy, working with each teacher according to their own abilities, while also providing perimeters, guidelines, how to continue the school and not to allow the school to break up due to the difficulties of the teachers. The fourth theme, school-family partnerships. Obviously, school-family partnership is important even when not in times of crisis. In times of crisis, it's even greater. And several of our interviewees discussed how it was important to cope, for example, with something which I didn't hear in the discussion today, the challenge of children far from the conflict, who are exposed to disturbing media related to the war. And this requires psychological and emotional support, which is ensured chiefly through the school-family partnership. Lastly, the school serves as a moral anchor, fostering a value-oriented perspective on the conflict, on the crisis. We saw this through prayer sessions, discussions promoting national solidarity, moral discussions on the war implications, and all this helps students develop a sense of hopefulness and resilience through considering the meaning behind the crisis. One last story to conclude. A teacher saw children playing through recess and asked them to come and recite a chapter of Psalms together for the well-being of the soldiers and hostages. All the children joined in except for one, who continued to play with the ball. When they finished, the teacher called the boy over and asked him, if it was your brother in Gaza, would you recite Psalms or would you continue to play? The teacher told him, our brother is in Gaza. That's how we should feel. Instead of a conclusion, I want to conclude with a quote from one of our interviewees, which I think says it all. Education must not stop. All of us are dedicated to their students. Even in times of crisis, we don't give up on education. I think this is what the students will undoubtedly remember. This is what what makes education ingrained in the bones. Thank you.
Hello. I'd like to present our colleague who is joining us from the United States, Nevada. So Chloe Dixon is a legal clerk to the Honorable Judge Charles J. Hoskin, and she is at the 8th Judicial District Court in Nevada. She's going to be talking about the protection of children in the borderless society, which is effectively the digital world. And she's going to be talking about the role of policies in advocating for the rights of children in the digital world. So over to you, Ms. Dixon.
Hello, thank you all so much for having me. I'm so excited to be joining you. I am honored to be presenting at this conference. It's such an important conference. And without further ado, I want to dive right in because I have a lot to share in this area. So as my paper was introduced, this research that I've done is about protecting children online. Children are digital rights holders. And as such, there are certain protections and rights that they hold that need to be upheld whenever states are creating policies. So at a glance, over 175,000 children use the internet for the first time every day, which is the equivalent to a new child every half a second. And these children come from various socioeconomic backgrounds, educational upbringings, and they come from countries that are at peace and from countries that are at war. Most importantly, they come to the internet as rights holders. The internet is a vital access point for children, and particularly for children in excluded and marginalized communities and groups who use it to have a voice in the midst of social and political upheaval. So today I will be discussing children's rights in the digital world in light of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child General Comment number 25, and how policies can best advocate for children's rights in the midst of crisis. So what is General Comment number 25? The UN Human Rights System is a framework of international law, treaties, and institutions that are established to guide nation states in creating law that will protect and promote human rights. The UN Committee on the Rights of the Child consists of a body of 18 independent experts that monitor the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The Convention on the Rights of the Child was signed in 1989 and became effective in 1990. And it is a landmark piece of international law because it helps solidify children as rights holders. So in the subsequent decades since the convention was ratified, the committee has added general comments that are meant to expand on particular areas in which a child's rights are at play. General comments are not law, but for state party members, general comments are intended as guidelines for states to use in the drafting of their own related laws. General Comment number 25, which is what I will be focusing on, was adopted in March 2021, and it lays out the foundation for children's rights in the digital environment. General Comment number 25 delineates the specific obligations that states have to protect the rights of children in the digital environment, such as revising or adopting legislation, ensuring comprehensive policies and strategies, and facilitating independent monitoring. It also clarifies the role of private and business sector actors, such as social media platforms and other internet intermediaries, who must fulfill their responsibility to respect children's rights. General comment number 25 is very vast, so we're only going to be focusing on a small part of it, but it spends time outlining 6 areas of children's rights online, which are civil rights and freedom, violence against children, family environment and alternative care, children with disabilities, health and welfare, education, leisure, and cultural activities. Now, at the core of general comment number 25 is this idea that underpins much of the law when it comes to children's rights, and that is what is in the best interest of the child, and how do we balance that with parental control? As was stated at the beginning of my introduction, I am a judicial law clerk, and I work here in the family court system in the United States. And part of our analysis for understanding custody disputes, any type of decision that has to do with the child, is what is in the best interest of the child. That best interest is the primary focus whenever it comes to making any sort of decision with the rights of a child. So general comment number 25 doesn't necessarily define how states should find the best interest when it comes to children as digital rights holders. And the result of that has led to various applications of the term. Another core of general comment number 25 is the notion that children deserve privacy and protection on the internet. However, none of these comments can even begin to be applied if there is no access to the internet. And I want to spend the rest of my time with you highlighting and clarifying how general comment number 25 has been applied in situations of crisis and amongst children who are in excluded communities. And the crux of that is to show how general comment number 25 can support access to digital services for children and their parents, caregivers, and other relevant persons, taking into consideration safety and the best interest of the child. So as I stated at the beginning of this presentation, the internet, whether we like it or not, has become a vital part of children's lives. Out of the millions of children who access the internet every day, many do so in circumstances that are fraught with political and civil upheaval. And sort of underpinning this entire section of the conference is how are children in marginalized communities able to see themselves in their rights? And I have a case study that I want to illuminate in this discussion. So more than 60 million children live in the country of Bangladesh. And of those 60 million, approximately 1%, or about 600,000 children, are part of an ethnic minority group known as the Rohingya. The Rohingya people fled from ethnic violence in neighboring Myanmar, seeking asylum in Bangladesh. However, this has led to one of the largest refugee crises in Asia, and refugee camps full of Rohingya people are pushing upwards of 1 million. In October 2023, a partnership was announced between UNICEF Bangladesh and Grameenphone and Telenor, which are the 2 biggest telecommunication providers in Bangladesh. Under this partnership, an initiative titled Strengthening Digital Literacy and Secure, Ethical, and Responsible Use of Digital Technology for Children in Bangladesh was proposed. The primary objective of this initiative was to equip children and adolescents in Bangladesh with essential digital literacy skills, to raise awareness about safe, ethical, and responsible use of digital technologies. This initiative expected to help over 10 million students across the country, encompassing 4.2 million students in grades 8 and 9. And among these students, it was purported that it would prioritize supporting 1 million vulnerable children, including those with disability, and that an additional 6 million students from grades 8 to 10 would receive multiple sessions of online safety and digital literacy courses. This is obviously an incredible initiative, but it's worth noting that sadly, this initiative was announced the very same month, October 2023, where news came out of Bangladesh that the digital gap was deepening among the Rohingya children. the refugee children who are essentially stateless and thus are not under the general umbrella of children intended to benefit from the digital literacy initiative. In fact, under Bangladeshi law, Rohingya people are not allowed to register their SIM cards in their name. And in September 2019, the Bangladesh Telecommunication Regulatory Commission directed mobile phone providers to stop selling SIM cards to the Rohingya people in order to shut down of internet access in a refugee camp, which is home to thousands of Rohingya children. Now, while this ban was lifted in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic, there were still numerous restrictions in place. And these restrictions pose significant challenges to the refugees, both children and adults, in accessing healthcare and education services. Rohingyas are restricted from owning laptops and cell phones in their camp, and this has only led to Rohingya refugees turning to far less secure alternatives for internet access. In a highly criticized move over the summer of 2024, the Bangladeshi government actually shut down the internet across the nation in response to student-led protests around the country. For many children in Bangladesh, this was a temporary problem. However, for the Rohingya children living in these refugee camps, the internet is a lifeline. These children and their families rely on the internet to communicate with the outside world, to learn and to grow in the midst of crisis. And now I want to leave you all with a few thoughts. Of course, general comment number 25 is not meant to fix every problem, but it is meant to offer suggestions, for problems that governments face when it comes to the rights of children on the internet. General comment number 25 represents an ethos concerning children's rights online and how they should be treated overall. Clearly, as demonstrated through the case study of the Rohingya people, nation states should be wise to the fact that provisions involving the internet directly affect anyone living in that state, whether they are recognized or not. Implementation of general comment number 25 requires coordination between government bodies, businesses, legislature, humanitarian NGOs, and of course, children. We would not even have general comment number 25 without the opinions of over 700 children who were interviewed prior to its adoption. So we would be wise to remember that all initiatives that fall under this category of protecting children as digital rights holders should recognize the voices of the rights holders that they seek to protect. Thank you. That is the end.
Thank you very much, Chloe. We're actually going to have another presentation looking at online safety of children. So it was interesting to hear your presentation by way of context as well. Thank you. I'd like to now invite our colleagues to come and join us. Our two colleagues, Dr. Reichenberg and Advocate Shiri Isarov. They're going to be talking to us about empowering youth in conflict zones by means of a project called the Street Law Project. I'd just like to introduce both of them, if you don't mind. Shiran Reichenberg is Executive Director of the Clinical Legal Education Center, and she is the Clinical Director of the Rights of Youth at the Risk Clinic at the law school here at the Hebrew University. And her research looks at specifically children's rights, well-being, access to justice for marginalized youth, the wealth system, and gender vulnerability amongst girls at risk. So thank you both.
So thank you all for coming and sticking through the second day of this incredible conference. My name is Shiran Reichenberg, and Shiri Isarov, who is an advocate and representative of Youth at Risk and works with me in the Youth at Risk Legal Clinic here at the Law Faculty, and colleague and a close friend. Together we'll present to you a very special program that we both teach and supervise in our legal clinic at the Street Law Project. We also have here Dr. Tamar Morag, who is the academic director of the clinic, and you will hear about her also in the presentation, but to keep you on toes, it will be later on. But first I want to say from here that when we talk about children's rights, and all those 2 very interesting days, full days with so much information. There are still so many children in our area that are suffering here in Israel and in Gaza, and I hope this war will end soon, and I pray for the safe return of all the hostages. And also it is very important moment for me because I began my journey as a youth at risk and advocate for children's rights as a law student here at the law faculty in the street law project. I was in my 2nd year of my law studies, and I joined the street law and was placed with 3 other students in Mesila, which is a locked residential care facility here for young girls who are being taken out of their home because of abuse and neglect. It's here in Jerusalem. And for me, it was a life-changing experience. I stayed in the clinical center as a student, and then as a supervisor, and then as a clinical teacher. Now I'm the executive director of all the clinics. But it all started with the street law, and this is how meaningful it was for me. So this is what our talk will be about, but mainly we'll focus about street law in East Jerusalem. Okay, let's hope it will work. Okay, so for 2 days, everyone failed, and I said maybe for me this will work, but no. Okay, so a brief historic overview, how it all began. So it was in Georgetown University in 1972. All this information is from the website down there, the streetlaw.org. Some law students taught their first street law lesson to students in a high school in the District of Columbia. And this is basically started this movement using law as the knowledge tool, mainly for youth at risk. And on this success, the street law became a model of law students teaching in schools and communities. It has been adopted in 200 law schools around the world since. Also, our colleagues here from Reichman University have a street law project in a similar name there, and us here in Jerusalem. So the street law project has several main goals that was developed throughout the years, and this is also how we here in our clinic see it. First, using the law as an empowering tool. The kids, the youth at risk who come to our program experience the law and the law enforcement usually as an oppressive tool, and one of the goals is to show them that the law can be something else and work for them, not just against them. The law is a life skill that needs to be taught. Not everyone knows how to use it and use it in a way that they can understand. We teach them about their rights and their duties and give them the knowledge for the next time, and usually there is a next time when they come in close with the law enforcement bodies, either the police or the prosecution. They'll know more about their rights. And also a part of a legal clinic, because by being part of a legal clinic allows us to supervise the content they are learning, also gives us tools to give the students who teach those youth, and also teach our students about social change. So this picture, for example, is from Jordan, which I'm ashamed to say that I found out there's street law in Jordan only when we did this presentation and worked about it. And I want to show you a very short movie that we also took from the website about the street law around the world and how it developed. it's good after lunch and in this time and after a day and a half to see a short movie. So all this amazing thing happened in the world, and here in Israel, Dr. Tamar Morag came back from a year in Washington, and feel free to correct me if I'm not giving the details right, but I heard her telling us this story, so I hope I tell it correctly. So she came back from Washington with this amazing knowledge about this program, but since I don't know how many of you know that Tamar is basically the engine and responsible to so many important changes and things that happen here in Israel for children's rights. So she was very busy, but she didn't want to give up on this program. So there's someone in the Zoom. So she brought the idea and the principle, and it started here at the Hebrew University at the 1990s, I think by Adi Kol, right? And since then, it's still going on. And in East Jerusalem, we started it in 2007. I won't go through all the details. We got extra funding and we were able to open the program for the Youth Probation Services group for kids who come from East Jerusalem. Until then, there was no such group or something like that for kids in East Jerusalem. And the main idea is that they come here every week on a daily on a week basis as a group. And thank you. And it went and. I get to the details soon, but I just wanted to say that since 2007, approximately every year, about 30 children came being taught by 3 law students. So you can do the math because I'm from law, but it's over 400. I did the math for about 400 to 500 children who came, who went through this program each year since it started from East Jerusalem. So what does it mean? What is the street law program? So our students prepare a class every week in different subjects of law that is relevant to those kids, maybe criminal law, labor law, civil law, contracts, and teach them in a way that they can understand and follow and know the rights and obligations. There is a group of kids from the Youth Probation Services, which means they are under a court order. Okay, every one of them committed a felony. Usually we don't know what they did, and we really basically don't care. They come to the university every week, and they are being taught by mostly 3 students in their language, Arabic. We give them something to eat. I have to say that due to budget issues, it declined the quality, but they still get something because, as someone said yesterday, if you want them to participate in something that is in the late afternoon, you need to give them something that they can focus. They are kids, so it's not healthy food, but it's something they like. And if there's something that they want, extra to know, the students usually teach them that as well, but Shiri maybe mentioned it about later. Shiri supervised all what they are being taught, so they won't be taught something wrong. For example, they follow, they have the ideas of the laws, but the way they are, okay, I'll get back to that. And at the end of the year, we do a mock trial, which is the highlights of the year. It's also in Arabic. The judges know Arabic. They are professors from the faculty or public defenders. They get a report card that they finish. Oh, you said it, sorry. Okay, so spoiler again. Sorry. And never mind. You'll hear about the mock trial later. But this summarize the program, which finishes at the end of the year around June. So it's amazing, but it's not so easy, since there are many barriers for them to come here, and those barriers come in different forms. There's physical barriers, checking points they have to go through. They have very hard experiences in those checking points. They can have, it takes a lot of time to get here. Some of them are under home arrest, so they need approval from judge, so they can come here, and for some of them it's the only time they come out during the week. The language is very hard. They are being taught by students who speak Arabic, but they come from the north of Israel. I won't go to all the culture issues, but the Arabic spoken here in East Jerusalem and the north is a bit different. It can create a way that the children are looking at the students sometimes not like we would think that they would. Even though they speak the same language, they don't know Hebrew. So sometimes if they need like buses or things like that, or need to read the signs, if it's not translated, they can't. And this is like just a brief of the barriers and the life experience that are very, very different, hard, and make them very hard for them to come here to the Hebrew University, which is located in East Jerusalem. And even though it's very close to the neighborhoods they live in, the geographical distance is very short, but the essence of the distance is huge. There's a huge gap. And this gap is part of what we do in our legal clinics. We try to teach the students about the gap between the law in books and law in action, and we also try to bridge this gap for our students and for the kids who come to the street law. And this gap, as being part of the main pillar of clinical legal education, and the work with our students, in the case of youth from East Jerusalem whose life experience are based on this daily struggle, and I mentioned just really a quick brief, it's not even close to starting explaining what those kids go through, but we did hear a little bit yesterday. To come to the Hebrew University every week when it's something they're obligated to do because it's a court order, and they have to obey to it, listen to law and law students, and most of them it's very relevant to their life experience, but it's very hard for them to understand the gap that they are dealing with. By the law students who speak Arabic but they are not really part of them, is a very, very wide gap. And now Shiri will continue.
I will try to speak about the more optimistic part of our, from the hopefulness. So like Shiran mentioned, the kids, the participants that come to the program, they bring with them very complex and difficult stories about their encounters with the legal system, where their rights, the one that we are teaching them about, we're not always protected. They tell very difficult stories about the violence they experience from police officers, investigations that they're taken to in the middle of the night, and investigations that are conducted in harsh and illegal manner. But within the safe space of our workshop, something profound happens. They find a place where they can share their experiences, and their very hard experiences are acknowledged and validated. For many of them, this is the first time that they've had a safe space where they can openly share their stories without fear or judgment. It becomes more than just a platform. It's a recognition of their experiences, their pain, and their reality. This acknowledgement of their experiences and validation of the struggle is a really crucial part of the project. Throughout the year, the participants often discover that they are not alone in their experiences with the legal system. As they share their stories, they realize that other participants have gone through similar situations. While it's depressing to learn how widespread these difficulties are, there's also a certain comfort in this shared experience. The knowledge that you're not alone, that others understand exactly what you've been through, it becomes a source of strength. And just while I'm talking, there are going to be some pictures. So this is a picture of a tour that they did to the Supreme Court that the students took, the participants. So I said I will talk about the optimistic part, and I think there's a lot of empowerment in the project. And one of them is the knowledge they get, because knowledge, every knowledge, but legal knowledge is truly its power. It is important that the participants learn about their rights, about the laws that are supposed to protect them. They're no longer just victims of the system, but now there are people who understand them and they know what they're legally entitled to. Of course, knowing the rights doesn't always guarantee that you'll be able to ensure they're respected in every situation, but there are moments when this knowledge makes a real difference. When being able to name your rights, to understand what should happen versus what is happening, can actually change how a situation unfolds. Another very important part of this project is the unique relationship that develops between our youth participants and the law students who teach in the program. Well, it's a pretty formal structure when they come to the university and the students are teaching them classes. Within the time, it becomes more than traditional teaching. These meetings create something special, a bridge between these two worlds. For our youth participants, the law students become powerful role models. They see young people who are not much older than them. The law students are usually in their early 20s, and the kids that are in their project are also between 16 and sometimes even almost in their 20s. So they see people that are not much older than them, and they see them succeeding in the academic world and working towards a professional career. This opens new horizons for them, showing them possibilities that they might have not considered before. Over time, the students become not just teachers, but mentors who truly care about their progress and provide guidance and support. What starts as a formal education often evolves into meaningful connection. The students take genuine interest in the participants' lives and challenges, offering support and advice that extends beyond legal education. But another thing that is very powerful is the experience for the law students themselves. As Shiran mentioned, most of the law students that are doing this course are not from East Jerusalem, but from different parts of Israel. And they often begin the program with limited understanding of the daily realities of the participants' lives and what they face. As they listen to their personal stories and build relationship with the participants, their theoretical understanding of legal challenges transform into deep personal knowledge. They begin to see how this abstract legal concepts directly impact young lives. The understanding that, like she said, no way a textbook could ever teach them how they learn how the justice system affects these youth in their everyday experience, and how sometimes, and a lot of times for our participants, the reality is different from the way that they learned in the law faculty. What makes this very meaningful is also that these students are tomorrow's legal professionals. They're the future lawyers, maybe prosecutors, maybe even judges who will work within the system. What they learn throughout the progress, what they see, the program, will stay with them we hope, in the rest of their careers. And maybe, and I'm sure that for some of them, these experiences shape their future career choices and their understanding of their role in part of the legal system. Another thing that is important is like Shiran mentioned, they're coming here to the Hebrew University every week for this program. And of course, we can't ignore the complexity of attending a university, which is an Israeli institution, and it carries a lot of weight and meaning. But beside that, the moment that these participants come into the Hebrew University is very, very meaningful for them and also for their family. It's being part of a prestigious academic institution, even temporarily, creates a unique and powerful experience. You can see how they are excited. Shiran didn't mention, but we have this program going in East Jerusalem and in West Jerusalem also, and you can see the difference between what it means for the kids to be coming here from East Jerusalem for West Jerusalem. The kids from East Jerusalem are coming, and they are very they respect the place. They come here. You can see how it's exciting and meaningful for them, and I think it's also changes. Almost done. The perception of what's possible for their future. While we're realistic about the challenges that they face, this experience plants a seed of hope, of a possibility of belonging in spaces that they might have previously thought that were close to them. Mm-hmm. And I have 1 minute, but I will finish with, like Shiran said, is the high point of our workshop. the mock trial. It's the highlight of our program, and it's a project that the participants and the students spend almost 2 months preparing for it. The participants write the whole case. They create all the different roles, and they experience the legal process from an entirely different perspective. And what makes it even more special is the audience to come. We invite their families, their friends, their defense attorneys, and even some of the prosecutors and the juvenile judges that are judging them come and see them. The participants are so excited. They come usually 2 hours before they're supposed to. They buy new clothes. You can see their anticipation and nervousness, and it just shows how meaningful this moment is for them. In the real criminal proceeding, they are the defendants. They're all often viewed as the bad kids. But here in the mock trial, they stand in a position of respect and achievement. They're showing their capabilities, their understanding, their growth. They are the stars of the show, but this time for a good reason. The ceremony ends with each participant receiving a certificate. So this is a picture from 2 years ago, and maybe from last year. And for some, this might be the first formal recognition that they've ever received, the first time that they're celebrated like this, and it's very, very special. You can see the pride in their eyes and in their family, in their family's eyes. And also, of course, for the students who, like I said before, who are working with them, they watch the group perform, and it's very, very, very excited. They witness their journey from the beginning to this moment. And I would say that the connection between them is so strong that even after the project is done, they keep talking to them, and maybe they have different problems, they connect to them, and it's very, very meaningful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that inspiring presentation. Sounds wonderful. So we're going to be finishing off with the presentation of 3 colleagues who've come to us from Ghana. I'm going to introduce them. We've got Dr. Elizabeth Achampong. And Elizabeth is a lecturer at the Faculty of Law at the KNUST. She teaches there, and she previously was a regional program coordinator and employment standards officer at the Ministry of Labour in Ontario, Canada. Her research interests primarily include, amongst other things, the rights of women and children. Her colleague, Richard Mensah, he is a private legal practitioner in Ghana and a future Doctor of Law, as well as a lecturer at the University of KNUST, where Elizabeth teaches. And our third speaker today is Zalali Gawu, and she is a lawyer, lecturer, and also future Doctor of Law, also at KNUST. So I'm going to invite our colleagues up to speak to us about hope in the digital age. And this really helps us build upon the previous presentation of Chloe Dixon. And they're going to be looking at law as a tool for ensuring the safety of children online, specifically in the context of Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for having us. It's been very insightful, and we also appreciate all the support it took for us to join you here. There is our title. We are looking into how we can use law to ensure children's digital rights. And it was interesting to hear Chloe's presentation. I think she has done a segment for us on the general comment part of it. This is an outline of what we intend to cover. So the digital world, whether we like it or not, is part of our children's development now and will be also part of their future. And in the Ghanaian context, in as much as children face threats online, that has led our government to make legal interventions, and my colleague will speak about the laws themselves. But we are looking at how do we balance the laws intervention when it comes to ensuring too that the children have their rights to education, information, freedom of speech and expression, their privacy rights, and any other related rights. Our paper is using the doctrinal legal research approach, and it analyzes how the law can ensure children's safety online while promoting their rights. So what's our argument? We are saying that with the right environment, children can participate safely in the digital world. Just a little bit about Ghana. It's in West Africa. It has a population of almost 31 million. And what is significant here is it's a very youthful country. It's unbelievable. But we have a lot of young people. Our objectives for this research is to determine the level of exposure. How well are these children exposed to the internet? And for those that are able to use it, what's the nature of their use of these digital tools? We examine the adequacy of Ghana's regulatory framework in protecting children online, and then explore how to balance children's rights with their protection. We reviewed the literature and found that some research has been done on how children are using the internet. What we found is, I'll just say the summary of it, is that children are getting online at a younger and younger rate. The studies we have one from 2017 and 2018, but I believe that since then, now toddlers are using the internet. So it's telling us it's at a much earlier age. Where children use the internet, predominantly at home, but there are some too that use it both at home and at school. And then how are they accessing the internet? Mostly through smartphones, but there are also other means. Their access to the internet, there was a UNICEF study with one of our government ministries for children. The 2017 study showed that all the 2,000 children that were surveyed, they had accessed the internet before, but 6 out of 10 shared that they had difficulty constantly accessing the internet. So there's a problem there. They only access it sometimes and not always. And it's even worse for those in the rural areas. They have barriers in terms of the cost of internet. You buy data onto your phone and all of that, and even getting the phone itself. Now, the 2018 study found similarly. So while 2017, 100% of them had access, 90% here in this particular study of 5,000 children also. So similar range. But if you look into the study, you would find that 56 to 84% of these children, again, they can't access regularly. And 4 out of our 10 regions, now we broke them even further into 16 regions. In these regions, 30% of these children, only less than 30% could access the internet regularly across our country. So more recently, 2023, the Ghana Statistical Service has told us that 2.6 million of our children do not have ICT. They do not use ICT. They had not used it at the time we did our census in 2021. Yes, so in summary, children have access, but they face cost and connectivity issues across the country. What the studies also showed is significant is that male children have more access to the internet than females. Then in terms of what they use the internet for, browsing, messaging, and you see these are all at high levels. Yeah. What is significant here is supervision. 56.7% of them use the internet. They indicated that they use the internet without supervision, and they are more knowledgeable than their parents. And so that can lead to issues and them watching things that you might not support. So we found too in the literature that uses to which the children put their access to internet is both beneficial and harmful. And we have put how they use it in beneficial ways. It's indicated for schoolwork, their friends, and entertainment. And then when it comes to harm, they can cause or experience bullying, cyberbullying, online abuses, harassment, and other. So in summary, it's a double-edged sword. So we find a tension that there's a strong protectionist approach that we have to control how children use the internet. But do we also consider that they have the right, but that right, should it be unrestrained? So there's, in Jagi, she has written about using a nuanced approach and not clamping down on what should also be a right for these children. I hand over now to my colleague to look at the law.
So good afternoon,
No,
everyone.
use the small one, use this one.
As we can see, there are a number of regulatory framework governing the use of the internet by children across the globe. So we've listed a couple of those legal instruments at the global level. At the regional level here, our focus was on Africa. I think Krell has already touched on number 25 of the UN General Comment. More interesting are paragraphs 9, 13, 14, 19. I think she has done a lot of good work there. At the regional level, we focus more on Africa. At the African continental level, we have the African Charter on the rights and welfare of the child, the African Union Safety and Environment. Because of time, I'm not able to go there. But all those global and regional instruments were looked at within the context of Ghana. In the Ghanaian context also, there are a number of legal framework, which include our constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, the Children's Act, Juvenile Justice Act, Cyber Security, Data Protection. A closer study of all the legal instruments, global, regional, and the national level reveals that all of them define a child to be a person under 18 years. All of them have provisions that embody the rights and freedoms of children. But what is significantly missing in a number of these legal instruments is that a number of them do not have provision on the right of the child or the safety of the child whilst using the internet, how their safety are guaranteed. But in Ghana, out of the legal instruments that I have listed, that of the Cyber Security Act, the Data Protection Act, and the National Child Online Protection Framework give a lot of robust provisions in safeguarding the safety of the children and online. I think I will touch a bit on it as we go ahead. But Ghana has been under the Cyber Security Act. We have what you call the Cyber Security Authority, and the Act empowers that authority to safeguard the right of children whilst using the internet. And Ghana has been ranked among 46 countries across the globe to be those that are modeling the protection of the right of the child on the internet. Throughout Africa, Ghana is second to Mauritius and among 46 across the globe. So per our analysis and discussion, these are some of the findings that we came across, that by the age of 18, most of children in Ghana had made their first experience online. More males than females use the internet. Rural children, however, are disadvantaged because they have less access to these online tools. Then children use the internet both for good and for bad, as was highlighted earlier. In terms of the legal framework, I've indicated that it is only the Data Protection Act, the Cyber Security Act, that appear to give a lot of robust protection for the children online in the text of Ghana. I've mentioned the fact that Ghana has also been listed among the Tier 1 category by the Global Cybersecurity Index 2024 as being one of the countries that is modeling protection of the child online. Our analysis also reveals that children have the right, in as much as children have all the rights listed under all these legal instruments, including freedom of expression, privacy, opinion, and others, the legal instruments also impose some level of responsibility on parents, families, communities, and governments in balancing and securing these rights of children whilst online. And these legal framework have been structured in a way to secure the best interest of the children and the best interest of the children. And this underpinning rationale runs through all the legal framework that, because of time, we could not go through them. Under our 1992 Constitution, particularly Article 28 and Article 40, the Constitution directs that greater protection should be afforded to the children in order to secure them from both physical and moral hazards. And these have been given a lot of credence under the Cyber Security Act and the Data Protection Act, which secures the right of the children to information and also how their information are even used in the. So these are some of the conclusions that our research have come with. One, we are recommending that there should be some level of censure online on online sites available for children in relation to appropriate content. There's a suggestion myself and Delali, who is online, indicated in one of our earlier papers that we wrote about freedom and expression. Then we are also recommending that despite the rights of children, parents, and legal guidance and their responsibility, children should be allowed to make minor choices whenever necessary. The Ghana's legal framework for protection of children online appears to be robust, but the government must ensure appropriate structures for efficient implementation of the legal provisions and regular reviews to keep laws at pace with technological advance, because technology always go ahead of the law. So regular review will ensure that, and as I indicated, under the Cyber Security Act, the Cyber Security Authority has been mandated. It will require the authority to do constant reviews of these laws. Then parents and guardians who habitually expose children to safety threats online must face criminal and civil sanctions, and these are all being provided under the Cyber Security Act. With this, we recommend that civil sanctions should be preferred, and it may include fines, bonds, and removal of custody. Then children who prey on the internet, make negative use of the internet, should also be sanctioned in accordance with law. And under the Ghanaian law, we have the Juvenile Justice Act, which deals with matters when persons under 18 years are in front of the law. Then lastly, we are also recommending empowerment of children to make healthy content choices online, identify and avoid and report abuses of predators. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that panel presentation. It's really well rounded up the whole session of this afternoon. I'd like to invite.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Everything okay.
I'd like to invite questions from the audience, if there are any. Yes, please. Sorry, what's your name? Hadar. Hadar. You can speak. Sure. Could I ask our panelists who are here to come join us in the front, please?
So this question is open for the panel, whoever would like to take it. You all spoke a little bit about protecting children, censoring their exposure to online content, balancing the rights of children with the protection of children, and allowing them certain freedom still. I'm wondering, in the context of Israel and the recent war, we've had this really niche issue of horrible content being posted online, but it's also a part of the children's everyday life. It surrounds them. As a lot of speakers talked about, it's impossible to separate. They're familiar with it because it hit them in their everyday lives. The school children they know what's going on, and they're seeing this online, and as soon as their parents are watching the news, which they can't really turn off because they need to know the news, they're seeing incredibly graphic images. So I'm wondering what you guys think should be done here. How do we balance this, and where does that responsibility fall on all those in the children's lives, like their teachers, their parents, and the government?
We have
Thank you so much for a very interesting panel. I wanted to ask Michala, Michala, right? I'm sorry, it's Noah. I'm so sorry. Yeah. I'm tired. I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you about, first of all, which language do you interview Eritrean kids? I suppose Hebrew, right? And what is their mother tongue? I mean, I suppose they're in Israel a system of education. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. And also, if religion is important in their daily life, they're Christian, right? Thank you.
As I am here, may I ask a question? With regard to street children, thank you all for your very exciting presentations, but I'm particularly interested with regard to children, street law. Whether these children, whether do you feel that these courses and mock trial experience had positive effect on their future life? So if there is a chance that they will change the lifestyle and vision of the future. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'll respond to Serafina. So I interviewed the children in Hebrew. Most of them know only Hebrew. Their mother tongue is Tigrinya. This is the language that the parents speak from Eritrea, but not all the children know Tigrinya. It depends. Some of them know just a little. It was an issue with the parents. They had a harder time to be interviewed in Hebrew, but they didn't want to be interviewed with a translator because of the lack of trust in each other inside the community. They didn't want a translator that knows their language to hear what they're going to say to me in the interview. So this is part of the fragmented community, also manifested through the language barrier.
I'll actually start with your question, but as a parent perspective, because it's very hard with all the knowledge that has been through in the past year and few months to keep children who have cell phone from being exposed. But I can tell, for example, that I feel that I have responsibility as a parent, so I don't watch the news when my kids are at home awake, because first I don't want to watch the news. but but if I do, I won't. I mean, I can hold it. I have my own cell phone. I can like look there, and I also know that my son was 10 years old, and somehow we were able to maintain for him not to see the horrible pictures. He did one time, not so long ago, refer to the picture of Sinwar's killing, and it was blur, and it still spoke about what he saw. And then after a few days, he saw this. He watched Minecraft on YouTube, but then the next video came of a kidnap from the Nova music festival, and he didn't see anything like that before. So he was like, now I know what a terrorist looks like. And then he started to describe to me, and then we had to have the talk and nightmares. And so it's really hard to have, on the other hand, it's really hard to have any control whatsoever about what they're exposed to, either at home or with their friends or at school or through the phones. So I don't think there's a good answer for it. I'll give you the mic. I'll just answer your question. And first of all, yes, we must have hope that something that we do does give them maybe different aspect of what things can be a bit different. And for example, the students last year brought someone from the Mechina here, which is like a pre-university school, to talk to the youth about the possibility to go there. And we know that 2 kids signed there. So we gain on this hopeful things that we know that happen and can happen. And we also know to be modest, and that, okay, everyone can hear me? and that we can't like control and do everything, but in our little time, in this little hour, we try to do our best.
If I can add just in one sentence to I can just add in one sentence to it. I'm also a social worker, so I will. From that perspective, I think the experience, like it's something you can't measure, but the experience that they get, that they're seen in good eyes, and that they successfully complete something, is for some of them very, very unique. And I think it affects you in ways you can't measure it and say, oh, because of this they did that. But I'm sure, and we see it's very, like I said all the time, meaningful. And I'm sure it's like it's plant seeds of hope and change.
Thank you. The matter regarding your question, the matter of exposure to not so much the news per se, but the specific problem of horror videos of incidents which are shared not through the news but through social media was a matter, a theme which came up a lot in the interviews and reflective diaries. And the main point which emerged from the data is the importance of the collaboration of all the personalities and which are related to the child, particularly the teacher as a first responder who needs who is able, not obviously always, but in some cases, to be aware either through behavioral changes or through being aware of the what goes on in the classroom, to be aware of what some children have been exposed to, and then to refer it again, to collaborate with the parents and to refer to psychology and psychologists and social workers as necessary. Beyond that, it relates to what you related on the legal point, which I've read. I'm not from law at all, so the question of legal moderation to prevent social media from sharing some of these contents.
Okay. That's okay, thank you. Yeah, I would say quickly that I will come at it from a lawyer's perspective. So, what would the law allow a child to see, right? And so, where it needs to be controlled, it has to be controlled. But in terms of the day-to-day situations, the children get aware of it. So, how they are brought up should manage what they are told, how it's explained to them. And we see the resilience of children to that when you are in a situation, there's a way to work with a child so they can continue living in that situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think 2 points. One of them, Sharon touched on it. Most of the legal framework that I look at impose responsibility on parents, families, and community. We can include school. So I've not taken a closer look at the Israel legal framework in terms of protection of the children. So that's one angle. The other angle is the Ghanaian example that I gave. The Cybersecurity Act set up cybersecurity authority, and that authority has the right to tear down, filter content. So it's always monitoring the internet, and the authority will get to know the kind of things that children are likely to watch and all. So depending on the content, if not appropriate to secure their best interest and welfare, it takes the appropriate action. But I've not looked at the laws that exist within this jurisdiction. But these are some of the approaches that other countries have used.
Okay. Thank you so much, the speakers, the panel, and thank you, Michal Meisels, for your capable supervision or coordination of this panel. It was fascinating and really a little bit even hopeful. We are now very, very fortunate and honored to have with us Dr. Alice Jill Edwards, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on torture and other cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment or punishment. Dr. Edwards has just arrived, and hello. We're so happy to have you here. We thought of maybe having a break, but then we decided, no, your presence is, such a highlight that everybody will be thrilled to hear your presentation here. So Dr. Edwards will speak for 10, 15 minutes. And then I will conclude and thank you all for being with us at this exciting moment of the conference. Thank you, Dr. Edwards, please.
Well, thank you first very much, Professor Tali Gal, and also Ronnie Lieberson for this wonderful opportunity to speak here in Israel on these very pressing matters that are going on in real time, and the important topic and the work that you are all doing about children and children's rights, but in particular children in armed conflict. If you allow me, let me start with a short story from my own childhood. It was a summer day in Australia in the early 1980s. I was 11 years old. I remember my grandmother was sitting in her armchair, the one reserved for her and only her, by the large sash window of my grandparents' beach home. From there, she could see all the way down to the beach, down the sandy stairs where the jack jumper ants would nip at your feet, or a sharp twig might cut into your toes, requiring a bandage or ointment. When I entered the living room, my grandmother was sitting there, holding a hot cup of English tea and muttering and mumbling to herself. She seemed displeased. I peered over her shoulder to see down on the beach a Japanese family was walking along the small cove near the boat shed. My grandfather, a fighter pilot who had completed many missions over the Pacific theatre during the Second World War, had bought the land in the 60s when there was still only a dirt road in the area and had built the villa by hand. I asked my grandmother why she was so upset and what was wrong. I remember what came next vividly, as though it were yesterday. She uttered words that I instinctively knew to be bad words about the Japanese family. It was the way she said it. Innocently, I asked her why she would say such horrible things. She responded with a quick tongue, "Because they killed my friends in the war." At that age, I had no filter. I had not yet been exposed to such a view. I retorted without thinking, "Well, don't you think your friends killed their friends too?" This is one of my strongest childhood memories. It might be why I became a human rights lawyer. That single conversation fractured my relationship with my grandmother, who afterwards hardly spoke to me and was always icy. My grandfather, on the other hand, never spoke about the war, not even when I found his metal dog tags, discarded in amongst a box of nails, screws, and other metal objects in his shed one day. The dog tags recorded his name, his date of birth, and his religion, so that if his body would have been recovered, they would know who he was and what type of burial to give him. My generation of Australians are among the lucky ones. I lived a childhood without knowing the harsh reality of war. The only war I knew was from textbooks or the Encyclopedia Britannica. From those textbooks, we learned about the Holocaust and the concentration camps that killed 6 million Jews, and many other terrible crimes committed by Nazi Germany. We learned about 2 atomic bombs dropped by the Americans, which flattened the towns of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, killing over 200,000 civilians. We also learned about the attacks on Pearl Harbor and the bombing by the Japanese of Darwin in northern Australia. I tell this story because our lives are forever interlinked in this global world. I often wonder what my grandfather would think about the world now, about the great post-war institution, the United Nations, founded, as it says in the preamble, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. With 120 armed conflicts presently taking place, it is clear that too many crimes against the peace are being committed and too few are being resolved. Too many people and too many children are suffering the effects of war. They are learning about war not from textbooks, but from first-hand experience. As Syria emerges from 50 years of the Assad regime and around 13 years of civil war this past week, we should not forget the image, real or artificially created, iconic nonetheless, of a father washing his children in a bathtub on one of the higher floors of a destroyed building in Syria. Or the photograph of a small Syrian boy in his red shirt and blue trousers who washed up on the shores of Europe as his family tried to flee the horrors of the war. Some of you may know his name, but I understand his father no longer wants the child's name in the public domain, so I have not named the boy. Thousands more have been lost to the Mediterranean forever. We should not forget the protests in Sudan in December 2018 and into 2019, when a young woman standing atop a car bonnet wearing white flowing robes, which to the outside world look pharaoh-like, but apparently this is a symbol of working women in Sudan, with her right arm raised in revolution. This image swept around the world and became symbolic of the protests. Sudan, with so much hope for a future, came crushing down months later when the transitional government imploded. And now I receive gruesome tales of slaughter, torture, and rapes of civilians. We shall not forget, among the 1,200 killed by Hamas and other Islamic groups, that also killed 38 children on the 7th of October, or the 116 children orphaned on that day, and the many children displaced by the war and not yet able to return to their homes. We shall not forget the 42 children who were held hostage and the 2 children who still remain held, and all those who remain unaccounted for. I have repeatedly called for their immediate and unconditional release. We shall stand for the children of Gaza, as an estimated 17,000 have perished during Israel's response. Many thousand more have been made homeless, orphaned, and are hungry. Their childhood has become a living nightmare. Many of you may be aware that part of my reason for visiting Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory is to follow up on the 7th of October attacks and numerous cases of torture and ill treatment that I've since received, including against children in Israeli detention. And further afield, in Ukraine, 20,000 Ukrainian children are estimated to be missing, abducted from families and institutions by Russia, with reports that they have been taken into Russia, their names and identities changed so they can never be recovered. Ladies and gentlemen, every child has a right to a childhood. Every child, no matter their race, religion, nationality, sex, or the political views of their parents or their leaders, have a right to peace and to play. Did you know that the average length of time spent in exile caused by war is presently 18 years? That is the precise time between birth and adulthood. I don't need to tell you that armed conflict interferes with a child's development and growth, disrupts their education, and significantly downgrades their life's prospects and health, and worse still, inflicts physical injuries and psychological trauma. Children become adults earlier, taking on responsibilities such as caring for their siblings or their injured parents, carting water or firewood, constructing makeshift homes, often multiple times over, or standing in line for food. They are also prey to exploitation and are at great risk. I remember when I worked in post-conflict Mozambique, which had suffered through 30 years of war, the consequences of which were great, including that the war had relegated Mozambique to being the poorest country in the world the year I was there in 1997. Because of disruption to education, the country ran double classes each day to get as many children educated as possible. I met a 21-year-old man who proudly told me that he had just completed year 1. There were adults who were in school because their whole childhoods had been stolen. When I later worked in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we heard stories of women giving birth in the forests on the way to safety. The stress had caused women to go into premature labour. Their children were undocumented and faced real challenges to be recognised later. The toll of war also leads to war at home. The rate of domestic violence escalates during and after armed conflict. I remember a Kosovar husband asking for my help because his wife had changed, he said. I don't know what happened to her in Kosovo, but something very bad. She was always a good wife, but now she is beating the children. Children are also not spared from the threat of torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Such torture can come in many forms, and although the universally accepted definition of torture is the same for adults and for children, decision makers and judges need to be aware that the threshold of pain for children is much lower than for adults. In fact, and a positive judgment in one of the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights, the case of Aden versus Turkey, this is a case that actually established how one would assess torture versus other forms of, in the context of Europe, inhuman and degrading treatment. And they referred to the intensity and duration of the harm. But they also added, by taking into account and assessing it against the sex, age, and vulnerability of the victim. In that case, the complainant was a 17-year-old girl who had been taken into custody of Turkish authorities and subjected to physical violence and rape. An explicit protection against torture and ill treatment is found in Article 37 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. A child also has a right not to be detained or imprisoned and if it's necessary, and only as a matter of last resort, also in Article 37. The additional protocol to the Convention on the Involvement of Children in Armed Conflict explicitly sets the minimum age for participation in hostilities at 18 years of age. This was lifted from 15 years of age in other treaties. The protocol importantly covers state and non-state recruitment. While the definition of torture at international law is the same, as I mentioned, children also face specific forms or threats. I've encountered cases where children have been forced to watch unspeakable things, such as sexual torture being perpetrated against a parent, or children recruited as child soldiers being forced and brainwashed to commit torture on others, or young girls abducted to become the sex slaves of their masters. Many years ago, I was hired to draft the first set of guidelines on child-related asylum claims for the UN Refugee Agency, which were published in 2009. I made sure to include a statement that read, "The best interests of the child principle, the basic premise of the rights of the child, requires any harm to be assessed from the child's perspective. The same is correct when assessing whether a child is a victim of torture. Immaturity, vulnerability, undeveloped coping mechanisms, and dependency, different stages of development and capacities inform how a child experiences or fears harm. Psychological harm arising to the torture threshold in war is very real. Children are more likely to be distressed in a hostile situation, to believe improbable threats, or to be emotionally affected by unfamiliar circumstances. Psychological torture is also prohibited under international law. In fact, normally what I say is we seem to distinguish between mental and physical suffering, but actually I've yet to meet someone who has suffered physical torture and has not had psychological repercussions, and I've yet to meet someone who has had serious psychological harm inflicted that has not caused physiological or other illnesses. So in fact, they usually combine, maybe not at the beginning, but over time, certainly. Every child, importantly, has an explicit right in the Convention Against Torture to rehabilitation and to an enforceable right to compensation per Article 14. It is therefore crucial that assessments and rehabilitation provided to child survivors are carried out in alignment with the Istanbul Protocol on the documentation and investigation of torture, which the new edition has specific sections on children. I was pleased to have provided the keynote address last week to an event to launch the Hebrew translation of the Istanbul Protocol, which should now allow practitioners, authorities, lawyers, and judges to benefit from the wisdom and know-how of this manual, which was prepared by 180 practitioners from 51 different countries. But I don't need to tell you all this. You are gathered at this conference because you are the experts on childhood, children's rights, and children in war. What we do need to do, though, is break the cycle of violence, which is fueled by hatred and intolerance, some of it taught at school, or by parents, or by circumstance. That said, and I do want to leave you with some positives, there are many countries in the world who live in peace today. Leaders and peoples have chosen peace over war, who have chosen good neighborliness over hatred, who have realized that they are all better off by rejecting cycles of violence and reaching compromise and starting over. Isn't that what we teach our children when they confront disagreements in the playground? As an international community, we must put our energies where they are warranted and confront today's enemies of extremism, intolerance, and hatred. Torture and other violations, whether committed by state or non-state actors, are the enemies of peace. Torture instills fear, distrust, fractures communities, and leaves long-term scars that can last generations. Torture and degrading treatment purposely dehumanize to make it easier for ordinary soldiers or citizens to become perpetrators. We cannot let this happen. We must spend resources in efforts at truth-telling, rehabilitation, and reconciliation. On the other hand, empathy is the solution to war. When we walk in another's shoes, we see the world anew. We may not agree, but we should all agree that peace is better than war and compromise is better than extremism. As a human rights lawyer, it is not my role to take sides. Well, as the Special Rapporteur on Torture, it is not my role to take sides. As a human rights lawyer, I have regularly in the past fought one side or the other. However, as the Special Rapporteur on Torture, it is not my role to take sides. I remain impartial and independent, and that means apolitical. Why? Because everyone's rights count. Every child counts. Human rights is based on every individual having rights. It is not a game of comparisons. Alleged violations are to be assessed against international standards alone and pursued in respected international courts. Let me come to a closing. I think my grandfather would be pleased to see that Australia and Japan have grown quite fond of each other. Japanese is taught in many Australian schools, and Japan is Australia's second largest trading partner. Australians flock to Japanese ski resorts, and the Japanese love Australian beaches, today without the ire of past generations. And while there remain areas of dispute between the two countries, they are resolved diplomatically and occasionally in international courts. So while we may be pessimistic about the state of the world right now, and particularly in this region, we should remember and learn from positive examples. For peace to happen, we must have leadership, political, military, community, educational, and faith leadership, entailing governance systems that are democratic, human rights observant, and where justice and accountability are pursued without fear of reprisals. Let me be clear, Israelis and Palestinians have a right to live in peace and security. Israeli children and Palestinian children have a right to peace and to play. And I have yet to meet a parent who does not want their children to grow up in a safe environment and to prosper. This best intention of parents is as universal as human rights itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards, for these inspiring and powerful words. Really, it was just the perfect ending of this conference. You didn't hear me in the beginning of the conference, but I said things that resonated with what you were saying. The fact that every child deserves the same things, safety and peace. We spoke during the whole conference about children in Israel. We spoke about children in Gaza. We spoke about Palestinian children in East Jerusalem, in the occupied Palestinian territories. And we spoke about children in other areas suffering from conflict. So really your words resonated with many of the speakers and speeches in this conference. My final remarks for today will be less structured because I was preparing them during the conference while listening to your presentations. So please forgive me for that. And I just wanted to share with you some thoughts that are more focused on the hopefulness side than the hopelessness side. I think we all experience hopelessness on a daily basis. So I thought at this time of the day and at this stage of the conference to focus on the hopefulness. So the main concept that I was thinking that I'm taking home at least, and I wanted to share with you and to offer to you, was nurturing partnerships with children. The notion of seeing children as partners, I think, appeared here in numerous presentations. We are together with the children in crisis as we are with them in the more hopeful times of our lives. Children are exposed to the terrible issues of and terrible events of wars as they are to other crises. But at the same time, children help each other. They help their siblings. They help their parents. Children contribute to the environment, to their communities, so they are active partners, active players in their own environments, in their families. And they are also experts about their own lives and their own experiences. So really treating them as partners is the rational thing to do because we are with them and they are with us. And that's why I think the questions that arose here are not whether we should listen to children. I think this was very obvious, but how we should listen to children and the importance of listening to children, and in crisis even more than in routine. At the same time, we have to understand children's right within children's ecosystems, and by ecosystems I don't only mean the different circles, and we spoke here again and again, and Bronfenbrenner's model appeared again and again to my delight, in their different circles, but also an important element in the ecosystems approach is the time vector, and I would say the developmental vector. And that's why I think nurturing partnership means looking at the partnership with children as a developmental opportunity, but also as a changing behavior, as a changing practice. Because as children grow, of course, our partnership with them changes and takes different roles. So if I think about this developmental approach to children and how they grow and develop within their ecosystems, I think about their schools, and we talked about schools as anchors, their teachers, universities, as we heard from one of the last wonderful presentations. But we also think about their legal socialization in the broader context and how legal socialization may be actually harmed when they face injustice. We spoke about the injustices that children face in different places in our region and elsewhere by police, by authority figures. But we also heard about developmental judges who actually give an opportunity to develop trust in authorities, and also by government who betray children, and we've seen it in Israel and in other places, in Gaza and elsewhere. Communities can be a source of support, a great source of support. And we heard about the great role that communities played in children's lives in the Gaza envelope, in other places. But at the same time, communities can alienate children, and we heard about this as well. So we have to look at communities as role players who are very important for the way children develop and grow. And last but not least, certainly not least, are the parents. And the parents who we talked about at this conference have gone through crisis themselves. So we need to acknowledge their own difficulties, our own difficulties as parents, but also the role and the obligation of the government and of the international community even to support families, to support parents while helping children fulfill their rights and develop to a healthy, during or continuing in a healthy development. And I think about development not only as something looking at the future, but also the here and now, the process of development, which is a right of children. So I will end with the idea that I had, and Dr. Edwards just thought about the same thing, walking the walk with the children, to walk the children's steps with them, together with them, not for them, certainly not against them, but with them as partners. So I want to thank now everyone for coming to this conference, and I have a short list. Don't be afraid, it won't be long. Before the list, I'm also reminded of one important point that I wanted to mention. And this is a research topic that I'm engaged in with Professor Sharon Bessel, that you might know from Australian National University, a research topic on the rights and needs of children during armed conflicts. Anyone who is interested to contribute a paper to this research topic, it's going to be published in Frontiers in Psychology. It's a large international journal. Please contact me. I think there were many presentations here who can really contribute to this research topic. So now to the thank yous. I have enjoyed immensely the presence of Elsbeth Mueller, the president of Fondation Botnar. Fondation Botnar is the foundation. They're very humble, but they're the foundation that gave me this present in my stage of career to come to Hebrew University and establish this program, the Child and Youth Rights Program. So thank you, Elsbeth, for being here. But also really for the continued and true support of the foundation to our program and to Minerva Center for Human Rights. Which brings me to Minerva Center for Human Rights, which is our wonderful home. And just as children need their homes, we need our home. And Minerva is our home. It's a wonderful and nurturing home. Advocate Danny Evron here helped and made this program come true. And he's here in his quiet manners, but really he's a key figure here. And thank you, Danny. And thank you also, and thank you, Barak Medina, who gave his remarks from afar, because he's outside of the country, but he's the academic director of the Minerva Center for Human Rights. I would like to thank all the speakers who came from outside of Israel, but also from Israel. It's been an intense conference, and you've all been active and participatory, and you all shared very important insights. And lastly, I want to acknowledge and thank my wonderful partner in this endeavor, Dr. Ronnie Lieberson. All of you here, I think, were contacted by Ronnie or by Iman, our wonderful Iman, who is not here now, but we pray for her mother who is sick. Every detail at this conference. I was busy with other things. I was dreaming. Things happened thanks to Ronnie, and the wonderful staff that we have here work with Ronnie and with all of us, Avia and Tamar, and the students who are here. Really, it's a wonderful group of people, and I'm proud to be working with all of you. And I finally want to thank our faculty, which really provides a welcoming home for these conferences that might be banned in the future, but we won't stop until until they take us somewhere else. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy your evening, and thank you for participation. Thank you.